Hello History 325ers, Cathy Brennan here. I'm going to begin today by discussing my argument for the paper. So basically what I'm arguing is that the history of American immigration and immigration policy is one that has shifted back and forth between openly embracing new immigration to restricting and excluding particular immigrant groups, all based on the economy or the demand for labor. I believe that the history of American immigration and immigration policy is one that is racially driven, discriminatory, and contradictory at times, and that there's a false misconception that America is a nation of immigrants, when in reality, as we can see throughout the history of American immigration and immigration policies, that America is definitely a nation of only some desired immigrants. So for my sources, the first one I'll discuss today is the Naturalization Act of 1790. And I chose this one for two particular reasons. First being that it was the first law of national citizenship in the US. And secondly, and most importantly, because it limited naturalization to free white persons, specifically stating within the act, any alien being any free white person. And I thought this was a good source to use for my paper because I feel like the act set racial barriers very early on in the country's history, particularly because it excluded African Americans and Native Americans from the right to naturalization. So I thought that was a good source to use. The second source I'll discuss today is the works of Alexander Hamilton, and these series of public publications he wrote in 1801, where 1801 or 1802, I don't remember, but he publicly opposed Jefferson's urge to Congress for mass immigration into the U.S. in order to populate the lands in the West. And Hamilton publicly opposed Jefferson's position, and even said that there was some contradictions between, his notes on Virginia and his message to Congress. And I thought this was a good source to use because it kind of proves that immigration was a topic of debate from very early on in the country's history. And yeah, that's why I chose that one. The next one that I'll discuss today is by Manuel Gamino, the Mexican immigrant, and his life story, and a series of interviews that he did. And this one particularly, it was Elisa Silva, a Mexican immigrant who expresses ambivalence of her life in Los Angeles in the 1930s. And I think it's important to use a Mexican immigrant source because I feel like they've been targeted throughout much of the history of America, or since the war with Mexico and America acquired vast areas of land. I feel like Mexicans have not only been targeted, they've been exploited, the Bracero program, throughout, for a long time. So I thought it was a good source to use. The next one that I'll discuss today is Farewell to Manazar by Jean Watasuki Houston and James D. Houston. And this is a book where a personal account of her internment, or when her family was forced to an internment camp during World War II. I think that's a good source to use as well, because it kind of shows the contradiction where at the same time that they were forcing Japanese into internment camps, America was repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act, opening up the doors for the Chinese to come in because they were the allies, or U.S. allies, during the war. And then the last source that I'm going to discuss today is an interview with my mom. My mother, who herself was an immigrant from Mexico, she immigrated over to America in the 1960s. Her mother was an American citizenship, though, but my mom was born in Mexico, and she immigrated over to America in the 60s. And she remembers being discriminated against and being called the quote-unquote wetback at that time. And so I think it's a good source to use as well. So the legacy of American immigration is that immigration policy basically before 1965 was heavily discriminatory, laced with racial prejudice, which began with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and continued throughout the 1917 Immigration Act and the 1924 Immigration Act, further barring particular ethnic groups to preserve the racial composition of a white America. And although some reform, there has been some efforts for immigration reform, I feel that throughout history, as some measures were taken to repeal exclusionary laws, at the same time, other restrictions were being placed on other different immigrant groups in America. Anyhow, well, thank you very much. Good luck. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your papers. Yeah, bye-bye.